today, this is also going to be kind of like a, thing for my future as well, to, do something like that. But today, we are going to go through with the history type thing of Egypt, according to Assassin's Creed Origins.
Welcome to the major regions of Egypt.
And yeah, so we're going to start with this here.
Life in ancient Egypt was concentrated along the shores of the Nile and divided into two regions. Lower Egypt was situated on the Nile Delta near the Mediterranean, and Upper Egypt was at the south reaching into Africa. Due to its proximity to the Mediterranean, temperatures in Lower Egypt were less extreme than in Upper Egypt.
Alright, so there's that part. Then we're going to go forward into the next part.
Until 3100 BCE and the unification of Egypt, each region had its own pharaoh and crown. Lower Egypt's crown was red and marked with symbols of papyrus and bees. Upper Egypt's crown was white with symbols of lotus and sedge-grass.
And there you see the hieroglyphics. I'm not really sure what they mean, but yeah. Of course, not really apt to read hieroglyphics. I mean, I might be kind of like, when it comes to history and stuff like that, nerd when it comes to that. But I could not read hieroglyphics. So,
Both regions had competing major cities, most notably Memphis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. There were different religious cults in both regions, each worshipping their own major gods.
There you see a look of it. I'm going to stretch that across and open up the map so you can see the whole view of it. And then we're going to go to the last portion of this tour in the major regions of Egypt. And then we are going to go on to the next one.
Many of the temples were designed in such a way as to represent the two regions, and ceremonies often incorporated Upper and Lower Egypt in their rituals.
And there you see that. Some major regions of Egypt completed. And, now we are going to go to this one. Bringer of life, the River Nile.
Welcome to Bringer of Life, the River Nile.
Alright, so we are going to be going on a boat once again.
The ancient Egyptians called the dark fertile soil of the Nile the Black Lands, and the surrounding desert was referred to as the Red Lands. The dramatic difference of productive land opposed to barren desert had a deep influence on cultural ideology, mythology, and religion.
And there you see the current surrounding area, the river itself. I mean, it wouldn't look like this in real life, obviously. It would look like a bit more realist, kind of. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see it the way it was then now, but...
The Nile determined much of Egyptian civilization. For example, the seasonal cycle of the Nile was so consistent that ancient Egyptians created their calendar around it. The flood season, or Akhet, was when the departing floodwaters left arable soil for crops. It was followed by the growing and harvesting seasons, known as Peret and Shemu. These regular seasons, along with abundant wildlife and rich soil, meant that Egypt's denizens were able to nourish themselves and ensure their country's strength in trade.
And there you see that. So, now we are going to move on to the next area. And, learn a bit more.
The River Nile, flowing from the south to the north, neatly traversed through both Upper and Lower Egypt. All of Egypt's major cities were built along this narrow ribbon of life. Protected by mountain ranges and deserts which acted as natural barriers to enemies, and sustained by the Nile's plants and wildlife, Egyptian civilization enjoyed economic and cultural prosperity for over 4,000 years.
Here you see a kind of, Memphis region, map of Memphis, brought to you by copyright Jean-Claude Galvin. I hope I'm saying that name right. Forgive me if I am not. Those are, the credit is up there in the corner, where you can see who is the creator and person that gave us the map here for this discovery tour. And now we are going to go to this one.
Both ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks referred to the Nile as the river in their respective languages. Stretching a distance of over 6,700 kilometers, the Nile is one of the longest rivers in the world. It flows south to north, spanning 11 countries. The River Nile originates in the region of the Great Subequatorial Lakes, including one of the largest in the world, Lake Victoria, near Tanzania.
There you see the credit with his Jacques Desclortres, I don't know, and Mortis Rapid Response Team, and NASA GSFC Visible Earth. That is 2004, as far as the credit of the Nile in Egypt. Then we are going to go, into this one next, up here. And we are going to do this all in one sitting. The whole discovery tour that I have left over, I'm going to do in one sitting. I am going to redo the completed ones for you guys as well. However, I'm gonna do those after, I get the non-completed ones done. Getting a little bit off course here, but we are getting back on.
The river flows through African equatorial forests, swamps, volcanic lands, steppes, and deserts, splitting apart for a while and picking up various sediments from each region and carrying them all the way to Egypt.
There you see the region.
Its main artery, known as the White Nile, rejoins with the Blue Nile in Khartoum. This is where it weaves through rich deposits of silt and nutrients, carrying them along in its wake.
And there you see the map. Credit the Nile 2015, art by Martin Deschambault. I don't know. Credit to Ubisoft. And there's that one. And now we are going to go on to the next area here. which is up there. And yeah, this will be the next area of this discovery tour and history in Egypt, pretty much. Some of you may wonder why I'm doing this, kind of, but I'm kind of doing it for, you know, my
the Nile
future,
crosses 6 cataracts
as well as, you
from
know,
the south to the
history
north,
type learning
creating
type
natural obstacles between the various sections of the river. The cataracts are long zones of about 100 kilometers, where the bubbling and rapidly swirling waters advance tumultuously amid enormous heaps of rocks and benches of hard stone.
And there you see the second contract from Nubia, cataract, 1987 photo credit, RMN-Grand Palaus Musée d'Orsay, Hervé Lewandowski, I think. I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, that is the credit, and yeah, you're going to keep going to the next area, which, as you can see, is right up there. And as soon as we get done with this one, we'll go on to the next one, and after that, same until we're done with this tour, as far as everything goes, you know. It might not be in one sitting, however, I might end up doing this in like 3 sittings, possibly. But since I can't like split it up because of editing and everything, and not having that
It is after
tools,
crossing Nubia and the first cataract that the river officially returns to Egypt in Aswan. There are still 1,000 kilometers before it reaches Cairo and the Delta, bringing life to those living on its shores before it eventually empties into the Mediterranean Sea.
And there you see the map of it, black and white, but still pretty visible. You can see the white, that is obviously water, you know, and yeah, there's that whole area there. And the same credit as the one before. It's the same area. And we're going to try to stay on this line, hopefully, which we are not doing a very good job right now of. And I imagine that this is exactly how they would have, you know, carried their vegetables, their fruits, their everything, their, you know, transferred their food to different markets and stuff back in those days in ancient Egypt. By boat, or, you know, if you see on the road sometimes, by horse or camel or donkey, whichever.
Ancient Egyptian irrigation and water use was centered around the Nile. However, they also had access to streams and rivers, as well as several large lakes. The Delta, situated at the north end of the Nile, also known as Lower Egypt, is a large irrigated area where the river splits into several tributaries.
When I first started this, I figured, you know, me being a kind of person that is, well, kind of a geek when it comes to history and ancient subjects and ancient cultures and stuff, you know, I figured, you know, if I'm going to do this tour, I might as well do it live, on my channel so I can have it, you know, for the foreseeable future, and you know, have it available as like a video and stuff like that. You know, a video that not only, you know, you can sit down and watch, but also a video that you can sit down and listen to instead of, you know, just watch. You know, but I will be putting this in a playlist of its own. I will probably be entitling it like history or something like that, you know, or ancient
The
history.
delta had several major brackish coastal lakes, bodies of water separated from the sea by thin strips of land. A mix of deep to shallow waters, salt swamps, and sand plains, these lakes were refuge to a wealth of species, as well as water and land plants. The occasional bandit could also be found sheltering within the denser reeds, waiting for the unwary traveler.
As you can see in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, if you want to see this in person, you know, 18th Dynasty, I believe. I don't know if they still have it there because I've never been to that museum. However, you know, if they have it there, I want to go see it too, in fact, because, like, as I said before, like, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to that. But yeah, we are going to go to this one next. And this one, of course, has 3 stations, so it's going to be a bit quicker.
Welcome to Deserts of Egypt.
Of course, we're going to call our horse, so we can get across this easier.
Whoa. Reaching out on either side of the lush Nile are the harsh, arid Western Desert and the mountainous Eastern Desert. They cover nearly 94% of Egypt. Each of these parent deserts have their own microclimate and contain several smaller deserts with a distinctive fauna and flora. Whale fossils were discovered within the depths of the Sahara. Known as the Valley of the Whales, this location is evidence of the seas which once covered the area.
Yeah, and there you see the whale bones in that picture created by 2007 UNESCO Attribution Share Alike 3.0 IGO. Yep. Now on to the next area.
Whoa. The White Desert in the northeast of the Sahara owes its name to its white limestone soil, contrasting with the yellow sand. The wind has eroded the rocks of the White Desert into stone mushrooms, the most famous of which is referred to as the Finger of God.
As you can see, you know why it's called the White Desert, white limestone soil all over the place. You know, as far as I can see, pretty much. And yeah, that goes on for a while. And of course, it would not be, of course, a desert if it wasn't, you know, well, pretty dangerous to walk in.
The Great Sand Sea is a large unbroken desert that reaches out through western Egypt and eastern Libya. It is home to a unique geological formation known as Libyan silica glass. The pale yellowish-green material ranges from pebble-sized fragments to glass rocks the size of rough boulders.
Of course, you can see it there in the map, and that is a NASA image, of course, and, you know, which means that's probably a lot bigger than it looks on screen. I mean, a lot bigger. And so, like, you know, that'd be hard to get through. You trapped in a desert like that, you'd need a water source pretty quickly. it doesn't get warmer at night either. It gets like probably a lot hotter.
Welcome to the Qattara Depression.
All right.
The Qattara Depression is located in the northwest part of Egypt. Reaching 18,000 square kilometers, the basin is 133 meters below sea level and covered with salt. It is the second lowest point in Africa, after the Afar Depression.
First, there you see it, the map and everything. I'm going to do it without the text. And credit to Jeff Ball's Visible Earth at NASA, 2006. So, you know, you would need like something like a face scarf or something, as well as in the desert and in the deserts of Egypt and everything like that. Because, you know, there would be sandstorms every once in a while, and, you know, they take your breath, I'm sure. I mean, I wouldn't know personally, but I could imagine.
The climate is very arid, with average temperatures reaching 36 degrees Celsius. The famous Siwa Oasis is located on the protected southwestern region. Today, the Qattara Depression is utilized for oil exploration.
See there, you see the famous Siwa. I believe that is what is out there. And yeah, so that is that. And yeah, so we gotta go to the next area now, which is Siwa, which has 9 stations. And here we go.
Welcome to Siwa.
And they don't really show it in the game, but cobras are pretty, you know,
The Siwa
deadly.
Oasis is in the western desert of Egypt.
Famously poison.
Geographically, the Siwan Oasis is located in a depression 20 meters below sea level. Its natural springs and warm climate aided in the bountiful production of date trees. Though clearly influenced to some degree by Egyptian and African culture, the area's isolation resulted in a unique society and language. While they worshipped the same deities, Siwan temple architecture differed from traditional Egyptian temples.
And of course, credit of 1994 to Jean-Claude Galvin.
Old Kingdom Egyptians referred to the oasis as cauldron due to its unique geographical structure. Oases were crucial for nomadic tribes and caravans. Without them, there was no chance of survival in an otherwise harsh landscape.
Yeah.
As such, oases quickly became hubs for trade, as well as areas of political control.
Of course, now we go on to the next station.
Because of the dry climate, there is very little rainfall to sustain the oases. Instead, underground rivers flood the natural basins. Since many oases have a north-south orientation parallel to the Nile, some geologists suggest they were once tributaries of the mighty river. There is evidence that ancient Egyptians attempted to create some oases.
And here we are at the next location.
The Libyan oases are the best known. as they are geographically and culturally linked to the Nile Valley and the Delta. These western oases have a distinct geology from the other regions of Egypt. The most famous and important oases are Karga, Dakhla, Farafra, Baharia, and Siwa.
There you see those locations, I believe, signified by those green and blue type tinted areas. So pretty much a lot of them. Those are usually your only help when you're in a desert, or water sources like oasis. And of course, credit to 2006 Jeff Schwantz of Visible Earth at NASA. We are going to go to the next location.
The Spring of the Sun is one of many thermal sources in Siwa, with the particularity that Cleopatra would have bathed in this one, giving it its name. The presence of the source beneath was attested already by Herodotus during the 5th century BCE, when the oasis was called Amuneion by the Greeks of Cyrene.
And there you see it, right there. And, yeah, so we're going to keep going and go to this next area here, right in front of us.
Oracles predicted the future, delivered omens that could be more or less obscure, and offered divine guidance. The Siwan Oracle was considered one of the 3 greatest of the ancient world, alongside the oracles of Delphi and Dodoni. Because of the Greek colonies in Cyrenaica, the temple associated Zeus with the worship of Ammon.
And there it is, the statue, and stuff of that, and yeah, soup. Of course, credit to RMN Grand Palais, Musée du Louvre, and Christophe Chavan, yes, and yeah, there we go.
It is no wonder that Alexander the Great made the perilous journey to Siwa in order to consult the oracle, emulating the actions of mythical heroes such as Hercules and Perseus. This action earned the approval of the oracle, who validated his claim as Pharaoh of Egypt. He was confirmed as the son of Ammon, conferring upon him the most legitimate claim to date of all Egypt's foreign invaders.
And there it is, credit 1909 to the photo of Musée du Quai Branly, Jacques, I think, Chirac, des RMN, Grand Palais, image, Musée du Quai Branly, and Jacques Chirac. Yep, and there's the credit to them, of course. And of course, we are going towards that temple for the finale of this thing.
The powerful and the rich would send gifts or travel great distances in order to ensure their good fortune by gaining the blessing of the Oracle of Siwa. Every successful blessing only increased the soothsayer's prestige. Runner Eubotus, a famous citizen of Cyrene, consulted the oracle in order to know if he would win the 93rd Olympic Games race in 408 BCE. He did, enhancing the standing of the Siwan oracle in the process.
1904 or 1994 credit to Jean-Claude Galvin. Again, if I'm saying that name incorrectly, I'm sorry.
The Temple of the Oracle of Amun was built in the 6th century BCE by Pharaoh Amasis. In the game, its entrance is guarded by ram-headed sphinxes, the animal representing Amun. They were inspired by similar statuary located at the British Museum. Another option would have a Greek-influenced representation of Zeus Amun, a human-headed sphinx with horns. This representation of Zeus Amun was very popular in Siwa.
All right. And there's that tour completed. And on to the next one.
Welcome to the Fayoum. The Fayoum Oasis is an enormous basin in the western desert that formed from the Nile's overflow. As such, it is not considered a true oasis, though it gives its name to the region, which covers Lake Morris. The oasis harbors some of the oldest archaeological artifacts of the region, indicating that the area has been inhabited by hunters and gatherers since the Neolithic period.
All right. As of course a tool. Credit to New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And with that, we are going to move on to the next portion.
The Fayoum Oasis drains into Lake Moeris, which was a large freshwater lake, but at some time became a saltwater lake. In the 12th dynasty, ancient Egyptians redirected the water flow with a dam and dug a supply canal using the lake as their reservoir. Irrigation enabled them to continue growing crops of figs, grapes, and olives year-round.
Of course, credit is 2003 to Jacques Desclortris, Modus Rapid Response Team, NASA GSVC Visvor.
Reed boats, feluccas, triremes, and kerkeros were the most commonly found craft within the landlocked waters of Egypt. They were used for various purposes, ranging from daily fishing, trade, warfare, and travel, to the ferrying of massive stone blocks used to build the great monuments of Egypt.
There you see, for a century, credit to Ben Raffaello Bencini, Alinari Archives in Florence. And of course, to continue it, we are needing to go onto the boat again.
The most impressive pyramids of ancient Egypt date from the Old Kingdom and can be found on the sites of Giza, Saqqara, and Dashur. However, one particularly famous pyramid of the time is located elsewhere. During the Middle Kingdom, some pharaohs chose the Fayum as their final resting place. One such ruler was Amenemhat III. His pyramid left a mark on the imagination of antique chroniclers. They refer to it as the Labyrinth, mostly due to the vast mortuary temple complex at the foot of the pyramid. Herodotus mentioned that he had visited 12 courts and over 3,000 of its chambers. But he was also well known for being prone to hyperbole.
And of course, credit 2016 to Jean-Claude Galvin. And then we are going to go on to the next area here. Hello and welcome. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell so you don't miss an episode. Welcome to the history of Egypt. Brought to you with this Discovery Tour.
Was built with a brick core and covered with stone slabs, designed to be impenetrable. The burial chamber, made out of a single block of sandstone, is unique in its design. Richard Lepsius and Flinders Petrie both explored the pyramid site, measuring 385 meters by 158 meters, and identified it as the location of the labyrinth. Their research conditions were difficult, as most of the site had been submerged by the nearby canal. Furthermore, the stones from the complex and the outer casing of the pyramid had been quarried away long ago. Ubisoft decided to give life back to this lost monument and the many crypts that were said to be devoted to the sacred crocodile god, Sobek.
And of course, credit goes to 1849 through 1856 to the New York Public Library Digital Collections for that picture and thing. Yeah. And now we're going to go on to the next area here. Of course, the next location is by boat. And we're going to try to stay on this line, but keep going off of it.
Founded during the 5th dynasty, the site was popular during the 12th dynasty under the name of Shedet. During the Ptolemaic era, the metropolis was named Crocodilopolis by the Greeks, in honor of the crocodile god Sobek. During the Greco-Roman era, the Cleruks, soldiers of the Ptolemies, settled there after their military service and expanded the irrigation systems. Irrigation and water distribution tripled the arable land and turned the city into a lush and rich area. 27,000 inhabitants lived in its precinct at its height. The city's location was strategic in controlling the many small waterways connecting to the main canal, and thus the Nile.
And there you see it. Credit to 2016 Jean-Claude Galvin. And whoever told you games don't teach you nothing, show them this. Of course, it looks like we are going into a canal. right now with this boat. Of course, canal being, well, I guess we're not, because you're getting off the boat here. I'm going back into the city.
The region's main cult was that of Sobek of Shedet, a divinity associated with water and fertility, both very important to an area that depended on irrigation. Many local villages had the title Town of Sobek added to their official designations. During festivals, ancient Egyptians recited hymns to Sobek, asking for his divine intervention. Greek settlers and later Romans would help the Temple of Sobek's economy to flourish by adopting the local embalming mortuary rites. Their sarcophagi were beautifully painted and adorned with amazingly realistic portraits.
Of course, credit to 19th Dynasty photo credit is RMN Grand Palais Musée du Lavoir. I don't know how to spell that or how to say that. Frank Rouse, I think. I don't know. But if I'm pronouncing the name, which I more likely am, I'm sorry. I'm not really fluent with that kind of pronunciations. Most of the time, anyway. I mean, if someone said the name to me, I probably get it after that. But,
Very similar to the cult of the Apis bull in Memphis, a living crocodile was worshipped within the precinct of Crocodilopolis' main temple. Known as Sobek to the Egyptians and Sukkos to the Greeks, it was reported by Strabo that priests fed it with meat, wine, and honeyed milk. They covered its body with jewels and gold. After its death, it was embalmed and placed within the crocodile's grotto, alongside thousands of other mummified crocodiles.
And then you see, credit of 2016 to Jean-Claude Golbin. And now we're going to go to the city of Memphis with 4 stations. And of course we're going to go across here. And here we are.
Welcome to the city of Memphis. Throughout all ancient Egyptian periods, cities had one thing in common. They were situated along the Nile's shores. Cities were often designated for government or for worship. Major cities had several temples dedicated to numerous gods and goddesses. Egyptians referred to the organization of their cities as a sepat, or later on by the Persian term nome. There were 20 sepat in Lower Egypt and 22 in Upper Egypt. The capital city of ancient Egypt changed many times over the periods.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd have to ask my friend, but we'll see. And of course, that is credit to Ubisoft State Museum of Egyptian Art, Munich, Germany.
One of the largest was Memphis, located in Lower Egypt. It was a key center for religious temples, including their most important deity, Ptah, god of creation. Thebes, located in Upper Egypt, competed with Memphis and featured as both a political and a religious center. Two important temples, Luxor and Karnak, were built there. A minor capital of the Sayyid dynasty was the city of Sais. This was the last native Egyptian capital of Egypt.
And there you see the image of it, which, of course, 19th century photo. Credit goes to Ministère de la Culture. Not sure how to pronounce that. Yes, RMN Grand Palais, Emily Bigcard, I think. That's how you pronounce that one. And of course, if I'm getting it wrong, you know, forgive me.
During the Third Dynasty, under Pharaoh Djoser, Memphis became the first religious and administrative capital of Egypt. Even when the political capital of Egypt decentralized itself, pharaohs were crowned in this sacred city in order to legitimize their ascension to the throne, up to and including Alexander the Great.
Yep, no problem.
Though little remains today save ruins south of Cairo, we can guess at the structure of the city, which stretched up to 5 kilometers in length and 2 kilometers in width.
And there you see the map. 1997, credit goes to Jean-Claude Galvin. There's a picture of Memphis. Of course, I'm guessing that is like a drawn-up picture because of the look of the texture and something like that. Yeah.
Memphis was also referred to as the City with the 100 Doors, or the White Walls. These names were in reference to the wall which surrounded the city. Under the protection of Ptah, god of craftsmen, the city was a thriving religious and economic hub.
There you see the whole city of a look in game. And there's the cult image of the god. And Third Intermediate Period, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. Artisans of Ancient Egypt.
Welcome to Artisan. It was under the watchful eye of Ptah of Memphis, the god of craft and architecture, that ancient Egyptians developed the unique rendition of the world they lived in. However, it is vital to understand that their view of art, and those who created it, was likely very dissimilar to the modern concept of the word. Instead of artists, the creative culture had skilled and respected artisans. The most significant categories of specialties for crafters were drawing, painting, sculpture, and metalworking.
Of course, he is working on a pot, of course, as you can see right now. And there is the statue thing. And Third Intermediate Period, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. Pretty much the same statue, however, kind of on like a wood platform. And then on to the next area here. Right here.
Ancient Egyptian craftspeople created both art and a wide variety of mundane, everyday tools. Every item created had a specific purpose and was produced by anonymous artisans who worked alone or with a team. Most crafts, such as pottery and metalworking, were utilized for everyday items. Luxury goods and artwork illustrations served temple rituals and were not meant for public display. Artisans rarely signed their names to the work, though they were clearly aware that they possessed a unique skill and talent for the task.
And there is perfume bottle, 18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Art, in all its forms, has offered not only a practical insight into the way ancient Egyptians lived, but in how they viewed the world and their place in it. The balance of order and chaos was crucial in both the physical and the metaphysical universes. As a result, their art appears to follow a strict set of stylistic conventions that supported this worldview. From households and palaces to temples and tombs, pottery, papyrus, and textile items were essential to the everyday life of ancient Egyptians.
Pharaoh, possible Seti the First, offering a figure of the goddess Mot. New Kingdom, photo credit, Musée du Louvre, our district, I'm guessing DISD is district, RMN Grand Palais, Christian D. Camps, and there, that is, of course, credit for that. Then we are going to go here. We'll interact with
In
this.
ancient Egyptian culture, drawing was used as illustration, such as seen in the Book of the Dead. It was also the first step in the creation of a relief, painting, or statue. Two-dimensional representations were concerned with order and form, and were intended to honor gods and promote the transition of the soul to the afterlife.
Artist sketch of Pharaoh's Spear and a Lion, New Kingdom, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. And we are now apparently going to go on a boat to just this point here. Not really sure why we're going to on a boat for like somewhere so close, but I'm guessing it's has to do with the crocodiles, like right near there.
Stylistically, Egyptians were concerned with the depiction of the human form's inner self. As such, artistic representations were not concerned with realism, but rather with idealized youth and perfectly harmonious visuals.
And there you see a bust of Queen Nefertiti from Amarna Thutmosis Workshop, 18th Dynasty, Egypt Museum, I think, Stylish Museum Zoo Berlin, Photo Scala, Florence BPK, for culture, and I have no idea how to pronounce any of this, honestly, as you can probably tell, in Berlin. So, at least I do know how to pronounce the city. Man. Alright.
An exception to this were scenes depicting hunting and battle, where the environment and enemies moved in lively, even chaotic ways. Animals and foes were depicted piled up, as if describing chaos, with Egyptians standing in solemn, disciplined poses, bringing order to the scene.
And hello to one of my moderators in the party, or in the episode. Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, New Kingdom. Credit goes to, of course. And from that, we're going to keep going.
Reliefs could be either in high relief or low relief. Either method required a surface suited to the desired technique.
I have,
Preparation of the surfaces differed depending on the quality of the rock. A quarried block only needed a simple smoothing. Rough-cut rock monuments, such as those found in tombs, required more work. Often the surface was coated in plaster before being sculpted.
Of course, I have no idea what any of these hieroglyphs say. I have not read up on that part of history type things yet. I hope to eventually, but I haven't.
For reliefs, preliminary sketches were drawn in red, then framed with a red grid to position the elements of the scenes. Corrected sketches were in black, and once approved, the scene was ready to be carved. This method likely explains the name given to relief makers, the one who draws the outlines.
Of course, 18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. It's going good so far today. I don't know, again, if this is going to be in
Statues
multiple
were believed
parts
to be vessels
or,
for the souls of the
you know,
deceased,
just the
or
whole
deities.
one episode.
That is why a sculptor was called the one who makes it live. This divine duty earned them the utmost respect. As with a relief, creation of a sculpture began with a drawing. Most statues were made of quarried blocks of stone, primarily limestone, though sometimes harder stones such as quartzite were also used.
They obviously, of course, wouldn't have said, you know, the one who makes it live in that day and age, because they would have said it in the ancient Egyptian language, whatever that would be, and whatever words that would be. And they would have said it that way instead of, like, you know, one who makes it live, because they did not speak English back in those days. New Kingdom, photo credit to RMN Graham Police. Not even going to try to say that name again. Les Freres Shrewsville? I don't know. Yeah, and I didn't like it very much. And no, not this video. I'm talking about something else.
In ancient Egypt, the profession of crafter was organized and relied on a specific hierarchy. Most artisans depended on an institution to provide them with raw materials. There were 3 working levels for craftsmanship: domestic, large estates, and within palace and temple workshops. Some royal workshops, at their largest, covered an area of about 2.8 square kilometers in size.
I told you before, I don't like jokes like that. Fragmentary model of a Weaver Shop, Middle Kingdom, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
At the domestic level, most Egyptians were craftspeople to a greater or lesser extent. The ability to repair tools was a daily necessity. Crafted everyday items could also be bartered for at the local market. Artisans with skills but lacking in resources worked at large estates, where the elite provided them with space to work and raw materials. The most skilled artisans were employed in royal or temple projects and benefited from a special status. They were provided with good workspaces and considered to be highly skilled.
Of course, the 19th Dynasty, photo credit to MBA, Rennes District, RMN, Graham Police, and Louis Deschamps. Alright, and there's that, and we will go on to the next area in a moment here. Yeah, there you see down in the comments, one of my best friends, one of the people that is responsible and also is now a moderator on my channel. Why? Because I said so. And there it is, the picture. Of course, as we just saw, we're going to close this and go on to the next area.
An ancient text known as the Satires of Trades has a number of descriptive summaries that offer teasing glimpses into how artisans were perceived. A coppersmith was said to stink and have fingers that resembled crocodile droppings, while potters were said to be like those who lived in bogs. This view was likely exaggerated in order to highlight the most enviable position of all, that of the scribe.
I'm concentrating on this right now, Chrome Digger. 19th Dynasty photo credit the British Museum in London, District RMN Grand Palais, trustees of the British Museum. And I believe that is that script is
located near the
Egyptian.
Valley of the Kings.
Ancient
Deir
Egyptian.
el-Medina was a settlement created by
In
order
fact.
of the king to honor the most skilled artisans.
Of course, these are
Its name
hieroglyphics.
translates as the monastery of the city. Allocated a house on the initiative of the king, these craftsfolk were regarded with respect and referred to as the royal artisans. Those who lived there worked on the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and its surrounding temples.
First 12th century BCE. Photo credit Musée du Louvre, District RMN Grand Palais, Christian Defense. And of course, next.
Archaeologists believe the site was home to skilled and respected artisans for over 400 years. It is considered one of the most important discoveries relating to Egyptian daily life. While much of the focus of Egyptian archaeology was on its kings and queens,
Well, Chrome Digger, he
it
doesn't,
wasn't
so
until
it's
the
not gonna
excavation
happen.
of Deir el-Medina that Egyptologists were given a valuable window into the community life of ancient Egyptian artisans.
And of course, 18th Dynasty, credit goes to the photo with Musée du Quai Branly, Showcase, Chirac District, RMN, Grand Palais, Image Musée du Quai Branly, Showcase, Chirac. I have no idea, again, how to pronounce that at all. Like, not even a little bit. So these have all been completed above here, and then we're gonna go here next. I have a feeling this might be actually in more than one episode, but videos like this that I will be doing in the future, more of, as far as like history goes and teaching type stuff, you know, I'll be putting in almost the same playlist.
Welcome to Evolution of Pottery in Ancient Egypt. Excavations all over Egypt have uncovered enormous quantities of pottery vessels of all shapes and sizes. The production of pottery was mainly confined to the outskirts of settlements due to the materials required and to keep the kiln smoke away from inhabited spaces. The function of the product determined the selection of the raw material, its treatment, its form, as well as the finishing of the surface.
I imagine they would not dispose of pottery like this unless it was rejected. And the reason they would dispose of pottery this way in ancient Egypt, I believe, would be because either A, the pharaoh disapproved, and the pottery maker was executed, and the pottery was disposed of. As far as that goes, 19th century photo credit goes to RMN Grand Palais, Hervé Landowski. Yep, there we go. And yeah, so I will look into that more on that subject.
Pottery was
give you
essential
guys a
to
little
ancient
bit more of
Egyptians'
an
daily
insight.
lives. It was used in
If I
all
find any.
aspects of life, from the storage of grains and liquids to containers within the tombs of necropolises. The most common pottery was made from Nile silt that resulted in a reddish-brown clay. Limestone clay, which made for more attractive pottery, was only found in Upper Egypt.
And there you see the workers working, and yeah, so they would transport each thing. ChromeHearts, or any of my other moderators, that is one of those people.
Early pots were made from pinched or coiled clay. Chopped straw, ashes,
That I
and
keep
other
changing
minerals
their
were
name
added,
and
the mixture was then
my
smoothed
profile.
and decorated before being put in the oven. Pots were fired in bonfires or enclosed
Apparently,
within a brick
blocking
kiln.
him multiple times doesn't work. So, moderators, you want to find a way for me? Get rid of this troublemaker. And this vase, of course, pre-dynastic period, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Sure about that? There's a lot of people that have had names like you have come into this video before, posting nasty comments and stuff like that.
The potter's wheel was utilized during the Old Kingdom. Pottery became smoother and more polished,
Okay, ChromeHearts.
similar to river stones.
If he's not...
It was decorated primarily in red pigment, with the
Okay.
black color achieved by exposing it to smoke. Pottery workshops were attached to palaces or temples, and around the late period, specialized workshops began to appear.
And there you see, unfortunately, no one is working on that right now. I imagine it is because it is drying, or the person went off to get more, trying to remember, product, like more product or more something for it to be completed. And so that is either drying, or he went off to get more product to, add on to it. And of course, credit is 18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. If you guys live in New York, I mean, any of you, you can probably go see that exact thing in that museum.
Quartzite particles, which created the rich blue or green glazing, became common during the New Kingdom. Mediterranean motifs and tin-based glazing came with the Greco-Roman era.
Yeah, possibly, but not today. We are doing this episode of history today because I am also thinking about my future, as well as, my future kids and everything like that. So, when I have kids eventually. In real life. 19th Dynasty photo credit goes to RMN, Grand Police, Beatrice Hantala, and I mean, you can propose it. I have a Instagram and a Facebook. The Facebook is in the About section, and that is, you can bring that to me kind of thing. You can bring those kind of suggestions to me on my business only website on Facebook, in the About section over my channel here. And there's that, and we are going to go on to the next portion of this. In fact, the
Potsherds
last.
could be found anywhere, and were the most common canvas for writing or drawing, in comparison to the more expensive papyrus sheets. Named after their Greek description, ostraca contained daily life records, letters, or could be drawn upon. Artists drew sketches for temples and tombs, or simply for leisure.
18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York. I believe that is a fan drawing or some kind of thing like that, because of the date there. I believe that is the date. And, yeah, so that is that, and we are going to go on to the next portion of this thing. And not really sure why this was doing that, but yeah. So we're going to go down from this, and after that we are going to go back up that way. First we're going to go to this one. I actually like that idea too. Kinda. Yeah, we should. Maybe later.
Welcome to the Egyptian household.
Alright.
In pre-Greco-Roman culture, women were considered equal to men in many matters. They owned property, testified in court, could divorce and inherit.
Possibly.
Until the Greeks and Romans restricted their rights, Egyptian women could take over their deceased husband's trade. Marriage contracts included mentions of allowances and items of value brought to the marriage by the woman, which would forever belong to her.
Alright. So there's a pair statue of Nebuah and his wife, Kenneth, New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to go on to the next area.
Certain professions were open only to women, such as weaving or professional mourning, while others were available to both genders, including working as servants for the rich households. Social status did have an impact, though. The higher in status, the easier it was to obtain education and access different professions.
I'm not going to view that picture because that is not kid friendly. So, we're going to go on to the next area. I mean, really, Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture really was not meant to be. However,
homes were generally composed of 3 rooms. First, there was the entrance, furnished with a small bench of brick, probably intended for a statue and protective divinity. Then there was the ceremonial room, meant to receive guests. The last room was either a bedroom or kitchen.
Possibly.
Furniture consisted of basic chairs, chests, and storage. Tables were not used for family dinners. Instead, each individual had a small table of their own.
It depends if Curtis Axel is defeated by Ryback this coming Monday. The show after, Survivor Series. As a model of a house, Middle Kingdom, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to go on to the next area.
Marriages were a social contract rather than a religious construct. Family was vitally important to ancient Egyptians, and children were considered a blessing from the gods. The father, mother, and their children were the nucleus of the family, and cohabitation sometimes extended to mothers-in-law, sisters, aunts, and sisters-in-law.
And there you see the kind of the script. Marriage contract tore up a bit, probably from more than likely from wear and tear and years. Marriage contract 380 BC or 380 to 343 BCE. Metropolitan Museum of Art and in New York, and that is, of course, I'm guessing years were kind of weird back then. At least to me they were. Instead of going up, they go
Status and
down,
wealth
like
played a large role in the style and size of ancient Egyptian homes. Commoners' houses were built with sun-baked mud bricks. Wealthier homes were often painted in white and decorated with various motifs.
So it would be pretty much like you could tell who were the rich people in the, or who were the rich people in the cities of ancient Egypt and who were the poor ones. Because you could tell, because pretty much, in other words, they would be painted like, like this in a way in this picture, which is represented by circa 1981, 1975 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and that pretty much can be like, I guess that would be like a picture of a richer person in ancient Egypt, where a White House, a pure White House, no decorations and everything, would be signified by kind of like poor type people, in other words. So,
town officials and the rich lived in mansions with numerous rooms that were luxuriously decorated.
That too.
Only temples and tombs meant to last for all eternity were built with stone.
You could not only tell it by the color of clothing, like their financial well-being, by the color of their clothing, but you could also tell it by the type of clothing, the type of things they wore. Weird. I don't know. Like, they wore expensive jewelry, like expensive-looking jewelry. You could tell they were, good in good standing. Or, if they wore, like, just cloths and no jewelry at all, they wouldn't be, I don't know. Not really sure. My favorite older one would be My Time. Hey, Brazil. Tomb of Nebamoon Detail, New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. That is another picture of a richer type of, standing family group, I'm guessing, or house. That is another drawing, like coloring and stuff of that. That would be like a richer type kind of group as well. I'm guessing you would not normally see in ancient Egypt a house that would be like all, colored and rich looking, standing next to a white house. I don't think I've heard that yet, actually. And while a cat is actually here following me, I am going to mention that also in Egyptian culture, cats were something, I can't remember exactly, but they had something to do with Anubis and the afterlife in Egyptian culture.
Funeral stone inscriptions focused on the main member of a household. Encircling this person would then be a spouse, parents, and children, possibly even siblings. These stones were so structured because there were no surnames in ancient Egyptian culture. Parents and children were a sort of family tree, which allowed for the identification of the deceased.
Of course, 11th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, and Stella of Ketu and Nefertiti. I have no idea how to spell that at all. But yeah, that is that area, and then we are going to go to the beer and bread area here. I'm not sure whose that is.
Welcome to Bread and Beer. While the Mesopotamians invented beer, including using a straw to avoid the sediments and herbs, ancient Egyptians perfected the brewing method. Egyptian beer's quality was determined by alcohol strength, color, and flavor. During the Pharaonic era, Beer was the most commonly used and important alcoholic beverage. The state and temples used it, along with bread, as payment to workers, and it was included on the lists of food offerings to the gods and the deceased.
Of course, in ancient Egyptian culture, I do not believe you would see normally the higher ups like pharaohs, wealthy, the wealthy people like that drinking just randomly beer and stuff like that. You would see them probably drinking, more dignified, I guess, types of alcoholic beverage, like, I don't know, wine or freshly squeezed wine or something like that. But like the rich would probably have servers do the freshly squeezed wine for them, of course, and serve it to them. Photo credit goes to BPK, Berlin, District, RMN, Grand Palais, Schurigen, or like, I don't know how to spell it. I don't know how to pronounce that. Berlin, Germany. That was 14th century. Then we are going to go this way here.
Beer was the popular drink of ceremonies and festivals. The Festival of Drunkenness was even dedicated to it. Considered to be quite nutritional, beer was also significant in the day-to-day lives of ancient Egyptians. Egyptian adults and children consumed beer with all of their meals, and medical texts include hundreds of remedies that contain beer. It remained the most popular alcoholic beverage until the Roman era.
John Cena. Because my Never Give Up thing in my channel is based on him. And there you see it, of course, 18th dynasty. The woman of younger descent serving the, I'm guessing, I don't know, the expensive beef. Well, no, John Cena is my favorite, like, right now. But, like, I believe those two women on the right of the picture are the more privileged, more wealthy type people because of the way they are dressed, the way they are jeweled up, the way they... Oh! I don't know if I have one right now. Unless it's Baron Corbin. Of course, those are the more likely, like, more fancier dressed, so they would be the more, wealthy people. And 18th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to go on to the next one.
Recipes for beer varied over time and depended on the quality of the materials. Bakers and brewers typically worked alongside one another at the same workshop or house. Many families often produced the quantity appropriate to their own consumption, with better quality beers produced for festivals and other special occasions. The most basic recipe used malted cereal as the main ingredient. Fruits such as dates were added along with honey and spices.
So more than likely, if you were to serve at a party or festival of any kind, I'm guessing the pharaoh would not be too happy, and not only that, but you would probably be executed after the festival, I'm guessing, because they wouldn't. I don't think they would have done in ancient Egypt an execution at a festival. I don't know, but maybe. I don't know. I don't know about that yet. Circa 1981, 1975 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to go on here.
Once baked, bread would be crumbled into the brew to start the fermentation process. Adding grain enzymes would break down the starches, turning them into sugar and creating a thick mash.
Nice. So, in other words, I'm guessing pretty much they are stirring it up right now. I'm going to walk over there after I do the credit thing. Circa 1981, 1975 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And as you can see right there, it is bubbling, so it is fermenting, I believe, right now. Which being bubbling, it's pretty much means it must be fermenting.
Once ready, the bread and grain mixture was compressed and then strained through a sieve with water into the mix of malt beer. Once fermented, the beer mash was transferred to large containers and again compressed by foot or with pestles.
There you see it, the model of it, and 18th Dynasty, 1903, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Any of you, again, live in New York, I mean, go and visit that, see if it is exactly, I welcome any, knowledge out of my
Once
basis,
smooth, the beer was stored in pottery jars
anytime.
and sealed with a clay stopper. It probably couldn't be kept
I
for
welcome
long,
any kind of
and
knowledge
likely
you
had a
guys
thick,
can add.
pasty appearance and texture.
It will help.
Very little was wasted. Leftover grains were reused to make sourdough bread or combined with the next batch of beer.
There you see a blue painted storage jar, a Marna period Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
While there are many ancient accounts for making bread, most of the knowledge known about ancient Egyptian brewing comes from an account by the alchemist Zosimus over 300 years after Cleopatra's reign. More recently, Dr. Delwyn Samuel, an archaeobotanist, has proposed alternate antique techniques to brew beer. However, experts are unable to replicate an authentic beer since not all of the techniques and ingredients used by ancient Egyptians are known yet.
And there you see the bread, obviously, not consumable. This is, of course, I don't think that's going to be well anytime soon. But that is bread circa 1479, 1458 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Food was prepared on the floor until the Middle Kingdom, when cooking benches were introduced. The introduction of durum wheat improved bread quality, meaning that the upper and middle classes ate better. The poor, however, still made do with a diet consisting of a gruel made of vegetables, softened bread, or barley.
Of course, as you heard that, the poor were not really, I guess, allowed to eat, as like the wealthy did. But the wealthy were able to eat extensively well. Kingdom for credit, and there we go. There's that. And we have two more stations after this. Oh, one now.
Dough was kneaded by hand or foot, and when sufficiently blended, additional items were added, such as fruits, nuts, honey, and spices. To leaven the bread, they added sourdough or leaven from beer brewing. Ovens were circular or beehive-shaped and made with clay or brick. If there was no oven at all, a bread maker used the hot sand to bake flatbread, a technique still in use by some Berbers today.
All right, as you can see, there's a kind of model of the bakery and brewery from the tomb of Meketra, I don't know, circa 1981, 1975 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And as you can see, this guy right in front of me, ornate belt, and designs and necklace, his neck thing that he has on him signifies he is a wealthy type person. You notice him standing around,
Ancient
not
Egyptians
really.
always had to fight off the omnipresent sand particles that were blown towards them. Despite their best efforts, sand regularly made its way into their food. Additionally, particles from the grain-grinding stone tools and ovens they used also contributed to attrition and prematurely worn teeth. The team tried to portray this through toothache animations and commoners sweeping sand off.
Or you see it in 1927, 18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. You can see that in person. I mean, I obviously am not sponsored as of yet. Hope to be someday, to, you know, with some kind of history type thing. I would love to do that. Love to be sponsored like that. I mean, if possible. Of course, now we are going to go to this one.
Welcome to Wine in Ancient Egypt. When the god Horus lost his eye in a war with Seth, the ancient Egyptians believed the eye turned into a vine, and the vine's tears became wine. Early texts, dating back to 3150 BCE, contain the hieroglyph for vine. Regarded as extremely valuable, wine was highly sought after by the elite. It was also an essential part of many religious ceremonies.
Of course, Seth and his companion, this 13th century BCE, photo credit Musée du Louvre, District Armand Grand Palais Christian de Camps. And on to the next one.
A millennia-old tradition. Grape cultivation and wine production was regimented in the way typical of ancient Egyptian bureaucracy. Egyptians kept careful records of winemakers, which they clearly identified on labels. Every landowner with a modicum of self-respect usually kept a vineyard. This held particularly true in the regions of the Fayoum and the Nile Delta.
Wine harvest scene, tomb of Paheri, New Kingdom, credit to Ubisoft. Yep, and we are going to move on to the next location. It's right across the road here.
Documentation shows that only certain craftsfolk were allowed to provide the containers required to store and transport wine. That and rigorous quality control checks established for every step of wine production shows that ancient Egyptians knew that the quality and longevity of wine could easily be affected by any number of variables, which they paid careful attention to.
Right, New Kingdom, photo credit, Musée du Louvre, District RMN Grand Palais, Georgie's Ponset. Yes. Yeah, I think I got it, at least, hopefully.
Egyptians had different kinds of wines, most of which ranged in quality from good to very good. The sweet Shadé, to which honey had been added. The soft Nejem, obtained by drying the grapes in the sun. The Ma, reserved for religious ceremonies. And finally there was the Peor, the mediocre rated wine, resulting from the second pressing of grapes and reserved for a less discerning palate.
And of course, New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. That it goes to. And there is that. And the bottom one right here. This is daily life, of course. And once we get this done, we are going to go back up and do the rest of the daily life ones. And I believe we will do one more section, and yes, it will be a multiple part one. So I will rename this after I can edit it, and part into like Egyptian history part 1.
Welcome to Oil in Ancient Egypt. Castor, sesame, and moringa were the source of the most common oils in ancient Egypt. Oil was used for various purposes: cosmetics, medical treatments, nutrition, perfume, athletics, and rituals, to name a few. The team decided to use oil as an explosive to add more gameplay opportunities for the player.
Right, credit goes to circa 1492, 1473 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to head up here.
Ancient Egyptians originally used castor oil in wick lamps, but also for cosmetics, such as facial and hair treatments. There is mention in some papyrus of castor oil being prescribed to treat constipation and help pregnant women. Castor beans were found in ancient Egyptian tombs as early as 4000 BCE. Castor oil was made by pressing the beans from the plant of the same name.
Oh, it's a lamp, Middle Kingdom, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. If you guys want to go see that in person, if you live in New York.
Olive trees were present, though scarce, in ancient Egypt's early history, and olives were mostly imported from Syria and Palestine. Their use and cultivation remained uncommon until the mass arrival of Greek settlers during the reign of the Ptolemies, when demand increased sharply. Olive trees were normally found in the region of the Fayum and the lands surrounding Alexandria.
Circa 1353, 1323 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And there is that. So, that is that portion of it, I guess. And yeah, we're gonna go into ancient Egyptian fashions. And work our way back up from there, you know?
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Fashions. Learning what life was like for ancient Egyptians presents many differences, and yet also surprising similarities to how people might live today. Understanding the daily lives of regular citizens so many thousands of years ago is ultimately what connects us as human beings.
There is pretty much a seated couple, 2400 BCE, photo credit BPK, Berlin, District, RM Grand Palais, and the name I cannot really very well pronounce. unfortunately.
Jewelry was a popular item among ancient Egyptians of all social standing. Both men and women wore earrings, rings, and bracelets. Status determined how much jewelry a person wore and what it was made of. Common folk wore pearl necklaces, simple bracelets, and leather bangles. Brightly colored earthenware and glass paste were a favorite enhancement.
There you see objects from Devon Tomb, MMA 840, 18th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then we are going to go on to the next one.
The jewelry of the elite was made from gold, silver, and other precious stones. Because gold never lost its shine, it was considered akin to the flesh of the gods. Wide jeweled collars were a favorite. Made with rows of beads formed into patterns of animals or flowers, the soft chiming sounds they made were thought to appease the gods.
There you see a picture of a broad collar of Nefer amulets, 18th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Though idealized, tomb paintings are a catalog of the changing fashions of ancient Egypt from the Old to the New Kingdom. Egyptians took appearance and cleanliness very seriously and were diligent about their fashion, hair, and jewelry as well as their grooming habits.
Stella of Infinite 22nd Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I believe she is, or whoever that is, or he, is offering, gifts to, I believe that is Horus. Yes, I believe that is Horus.
The fabric of ancient Egyptian clothing was almost entirely made from various grades of linen. Linen was commonly white, draped over the body, and cinched at the waist, though some garments were sewn or tailored. Wealthy men wore long tunics, loincloths, or kilts, while poor men only wore loincloths. Women wore long dresses, with differences residing in the quality of the fabric, depending on social status. Egyptians commonly went barefoot, but could also wear sandals made from papyrus fiber or leather.
Pleated tunic, Middle Kingdom photo credit, Musée du Louvre, District RMN, Grand Palais. And yeah, that. Alright.
Cosmetics, including concoctions to prevent body odor and bad breath, were an integral part of everyday life for Egyptians. Used by both men and women, cosmetics were used as moisturizing ointments and sun protection as much as for beautification. Red ochre, a natural clay, was the most readily available cosmetic to tint lips and cheeks. Henna was used on nails and lips, and as hair coloring. It was also favored by richer women to decorate their palms and the soles of their feet.
Alright, there you see toilet set, 18th Dynasty photo credit, the British Museum in London, District RMN, Grand Palais, trustees of the British Museum.
Egyptians believed kohl had magical powers, wearing it as black eyeliner to protect their eyes from the sun and to prevent eye infections from particles in the flooded Nile River. A special green kohl, made from ground malachite, was worn for ceremonies and religious rituals.
Tomb painting representing a banquet scene, detailed guest tomb of Moon Thebes, 18th Dynasty Photo Credit, the British Museum in London, District Ironman Grand Palais, Trustees of the British Museum. And then we are going to go to our next location, right here.
Women and teenage girls wore their hair long and often braided. Wealthier women included carved combs or hairpins. The length of men's hair rarely dropped past the shoulders. They were mostly clean-shaven during the dynastic period, a trend began by the elite and soon adopted by the general populace. Queen Hatshepsut donned an artificial beard when she became pharaoh.
All right. Fiber and 18th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Wigs were very popular, used for special occasions or to conceal gray hair or baldness. They were fastened in place with beeswax. The most expensive wigs were made from human hair and reserved for royalty. Other wigs were composed of linen, wool, or animal hair.
Photo credit Musée du Louvre, gesture. Iron Man, Grand Palais, 18th Dynasty.
Prepubescent children generally had their heads shaved. Young girls kept some strands intact, while young boys had a braid worn on the side.
See statue of city with side lock, 18th Dynasty, photos credit, Iron Man, Grand Palais, Fan Scout. Got a moment here. Alright, so that one is done with that then, and we are going to move up to this one, leather and linen in ancient Egypt. Right. Leather and linen in ancient Egypt.
Welcome to Leather and Linen in Ancient Egypt. Tanning, a process which dates from prehistoric times, was present although not highly valued in Egypt due to the heat. Leather was reserved mainly for things such as sandals, leather bags, dagger sheaths, quivers, and other similar items. Leopard hides, unlike regular leather, were highly valued and usually worn by priests.
All right. For the dead, 18th Dynasty, photo credit, Iron Man, Grand Palais, Daniel Arnaudette, Sean Shorm. I don't know. And then I guess they're going up into the city now. Apparently.
Valued for its coolness and freshness in hot weather, linen was the fiber most commonly used for fabrics and textiles. It was produced from flax, which was plentiful in Egypt. Fibers were usually dyed before weaving. While color was used in the production of textiles, Dyes weren't commonly used for clothing, and most Egyptians wore white. The color represented spiritual purity, a goal to reach for every day of one's mortal life.
Now you can see sheet with linen mark, coarse spin, medium weave, 18th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then next we are going up here. Oops.
Various shades were achieved using woad, a dye produced from the leaves of Isotis tinctoria. The plant was cultivated for this purpose within the Nile Delta and allowed for the creation of various colors. For example, different maceration times of the leaves would result in colors ranging from red to green, while adding in limestone shifted it to blue. During the Greco-Roman period, other ingredients were found, resulting in a wider range of colors.
All right. Sheet with blue stripes, New Kingdom, photo credit, Musée de la Ville, District RMN, Grand Palais, Georges, Poncet. And there's that one. Right. And next, we're going up, apparently.
This area's style is strongly influenced by the dye baths and tanneries of modern-day Fes in Morocco. This helped Ubisoft envision what such locations might have been like in ancient Egypt. While this tannery is within the city walls, back then they were often found outside the city boundaries. The tanner's trade was considered off-putting by the Greeks, as all these operations resulted in noxious smells.
Tanning and dyeing tanks, 5 March 2016. I'm guessing for photo by E. Agostini, I think, and Jetty Images. All right, there's that. Like a more look to it, I guess. And of course, it would have been that dirty, and, you know, in that time as well. I mean, it's been shaped for some reason. So we're gonna finish this episode, well, this part up, like these areas up in like the daily life, and as soon as we do that, we are going to end this episode.
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Medicine. Evidence of advanced medical procedures have been found on mummies, and ancient Egyptians left detailed medical writings from diagnosis to follow-up treatment. One of the oldest known surgical studies is the Edwin Smith Papyrus. It's one of the first documents in history that notes an association between the integrity of the brain and cognitive functions, including cases of ocular complications and paralysis following head trauma. Vinegar-treated marble stone from Memphis was used as an anesthetic.
Pharmaceutical jar, 26th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Another similar document, the Ebers Medical Papyrus, is over 20 meters long and 30 centimeters wide. It details treatments of 48 surgical cases and contains 877 paragraphs describing various diseases. Alongside accurate and factual scientific approaches, the papyrus has more than 700 magic formulas and incantations to ward off demons and disease. This demonstrates how ancient Egyptians believed in a harmonious balance between religion and science.
Evers Papyrus page circa 1500 BCE, U.S. National Library of Medicine.
Remedies were considered as medicine and carried by doctors and priests. Village doctors often had another job alongside their medical duties and the preparation of medicines. A cure for blindness was made of fermented honey, ochre, and coal. The science behind it was that honey functioned as an antiseptic and antibacterial, while ochre would reduce the swelling. All of their knowledge did not always suffice. Ramses II died of an infection caused by an abscessed tooth.
Man, there you see ointment boxes, or box, 526 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And there is that one, and then we are going to go to this one. Whoops. Domesticated animals of ancient Egypt. I think this is going to clear up the little cat symbolism. There we go. Of like its connection to Anubis in the afterlife in Egypt, ancient Egypt.
Welcome to Domesticated Animals of Ancient Egypt. Agriculture and domesticated livestock were introduced 6,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found traces of cattle, donkeys, pigs, and dogs. Dromedary are thought to have been introduced during the Persian invasion.
The fragment of King Khufu's cattle, 4th Dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Pets were deeply cherished in ancient Egypt. Many illustrations of children often include a pet in the depiction.
That's, of course, a cat figurine. New Kingdom. Photo. Credit. British Museum, London. District Arnhem, Grand Palais, trustees of the British Museum. You see a dog right there. Ancient Egyptian dog. Like, I forget what they are called, but I watched a video on it a while ago. I'll have to remember what that was about, like what that said. Yeah, I will try to find it after this video is up and live.
One of ancient Egypt's most iconic animals, the cat, wasn't adopted into their daily life until the Middle Kingdom. Since they were so highly capable of killing snakes and rodents, cats were present throughout every period. However, they only became pets sometime during the Middle Kingdom. Prince Thutmose, son of Amenhotep III, had his cat Tamu laid to rest in its own sarcophagi.
Right. And from the children substantially restored, 19th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
The earliest reference to dogs dates back to 5000 BCE. They were popular pets as they helped hunters and protected herds. They were closely linked to Anubis, the jackal-headed god. Baboons, monkeys, and even falcons were tamed as pets. Each was mummified and buried with as much ceremony as any family member.
Mechanical Dog, 18th Century Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Ancient Egyptian cultivation. For those of you listening to this, we are in a loading screen right now. That is why it comes up, sometimes pauses, and you hear that noise and stuff, but, yeah.
Welcome to Ancient Egyptian Cultivation. The new grain types of the Ptolemaic period required a great deal of water. Farmers needed to ensure they had effective, consistent irrigation. The Nile's rising and receding waters naturally irrigated most of the crops. Areas where the Nile didn't reach, such as gardens and vegetable plots, required an irrigation tool known as the shadoof. The shadoof allowed easy transport of water from its source. It consisted of a tall wooden frame with a long pivoting pole and suspended bucket. The system could be raised and lowered with little effort.
There you see an image of it. 19th Dynasty. Photo credit BPK Berlin. Insert Armand Graham Polias. Image BPK.
Later, a sakya, or water wheel, was invented. The sakya needed animals to turn the wheel, which rotated buckets through the water. It drew the water to an elevation of 3.5 meters and enabled a great deal of control over the irrigation process. This improvement supplied larger areas and thus resulted in larger harvests.
There you see a picture, 20th century, photo credit, we say, Du Branley, Waukee, Chirac, District, Araman, Grand Polias, Embassy, we say, yeah, pretty much the same thing.
The threshing process separated the grain from its husk. Workers would spread the ears on clean ground. Oxen, cows, or donkeys were then guided back and forth to trample the grain. This continuous movement worked the grain loose while preventing the animals from eating it. Unwanted chaff and straw were swept away, or gathered and added to the mud used to make bricks, to make them stronger. Winnowing was the stage where workers used wooden scoops to throw ears in the air. The wind carried off the chaff, leaving the heavier seeds to fall to the ground. This action was repeated until the undesired materials were sifted out. Grain waste was mixed with manure or other organic substances to produce brick-shaped dung loaves that could be easily burned. A standardized brick size enabled Egyptians to mass produce this byproduct and use it as a commodity.
Brickville, New Kingdom, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Transporting large amounts of grain required ships equipped to carry heavy loads. These goods were moved during the Nile's flooding season, when the river was deep enough for large ships. The transports stopped at checkpoints to accommodate customs and police controls, as well as for technical requirements and weather conditions.
There you see a kind of distorted image of the boat. kind of barely make it out. People loading grains on a boat. Photo credit, Monsieur for District Ahmed Grand Palais Christian de Camps.
Having reached Alexandria's inner harbor, the wheat was unloaded under the supervision of a civil servant in charge of wheat management. Portions were distributed to Alexandria's city market, and the remaining stockpile was either exported or stored in warehouses.
You see an image of the, model of a granary with a scribe and overseer, Middle Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Grain storage facilities were located across all of Egypt. Temples and institutions had large silos, while individual houses had storage sheds. In some houses, arched cellars were built into the foundations. These watertight chambers were accessible from the ground floor through a trapdoor. Royal granaries acted as the storehouse and distribution centers, and managed state payments to civil servants, soldiers, and the police. Though plastered on the inside, silos weren't completely sealed, and so remained susceptible to mice infestations.
Model of a granary with scribes, Middle Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
When the grain was ready for processing, it was poured into bowls and pounded into a coarse flour. That flour was then passed through a sieve to make it of finer quality and further ground between stones. Ancient Egyptians did not stock flour. Instead, fresh grain was portioned out each time to produce flour as it was needed.
Sifting meal, tomb of Red Mir, New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
The sieves used by ancient Egyptians were unable to filter out sand and stones. Grit often passed into the flour, causing long-term tooth abrasions among all classes of Egyptians.
And there you see it. That thing. Model of the model sieve from a plantation deposit for Hatshepsut's Temple, New Kingdom Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And welcome back, by the way. And we are going to continue going up this way and trying to get this done today, or this episode. So when this episode is up and I'm able to edit it on the channel, I will be editing it as the name goes anyway, which is pretty much the only way I can edit it right now. And I'll be editing it to the name of I think we're both pretty good. But I don't like to do competitions, actually. I don't like to compete against other YouTubers, and I think we're all the same, and I believe that, we're all trying to get to the same place. So that's why I don't like to compete, But we are going to try to continue this, even though it is going to be a long episode. I will be renaming it once I can to Egyptian History Part 1. So that will
Welcome to Agriculture and Seasons.
So you're the narrator. We are going to be going into agriculture and seasons now.
While crops were cultivated in different oases around the desert, most of the arable lands were near the Nile. Two types of cereal grain were cultivated, barley, and an ancient wheat known as emmer. These two key ingredients contributed in establishing bread and beer
Yeah, I know.
as the staple of the Egyptian diet and the basis of its economy.
Of course, that is obviously not a, exact representation of the ripe barley. It is a stone image, of course, as you can see. And circa 1353, 1336 BCE, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And now we will go on to the next station. There we go.
The Ptolemaic era created an agricultural revolution with the introduction of advanced agricultural techniques and new grain types such as rice, durum wheat, and pearl millet. The resulting agricultural mass production greatly increased the economy of ancient Egypt. It also prompted the development of storage and transportation, allowing long-distance trade with other regions.
Again, for those of you listening to this episode and not watching it, I'm going to explain what they are saying usually, and as best as I can. Harvest scenes, tomb of Mena. It is pretty much a papyrus, I believe, either that or a stone image. 18th dynasty, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. You want to see that in person if you live in New York? Yeah, that is where it is. And then we are going to go on to the next station now. I'll let my moderator tell you that. I'm kind of still working on this episode. So,
both bread and beer rations
it's going to be a long
part of
one.
a system of barter payment. The state used those goods to pay wages for those who worked in the quarries and at the construction sites. Beer was so important to ancient Egyptians, they had a goddess of beer brewing, Tenenet. Tenenet is seen in many paintings and sculptures with beer, and women are depicted as the primary beer makers.
Alright, what I have here right now is pretty much what she discussed in the narrator position, which is a stone image. As if you see the episode, if you're watching it, you'll see the image. It is also available at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, 5th Dynasty, Tomb Chapel of Ramkai, North Wall. Yeah. More likely images of it at other museums as well. I don't think it would just be at one museum, though. The original
in order to increase agricultural production, fertile land was divided into plots, and large agricultural villages were encouraged. The state and temples were the biggest landowners. Depending on the region, fertile land was managed by civil servants or rented to individuals. Ancient Egyptians relied on rudimentary tools for land cultivation. Soil was broken down with hoes, and wing plows were used to make furrows.
Maquette of cattle and labor, first intermediate period, photo credit Musée du Louvre, District Aramed, Grand Palais, Benjamin Sulindi, or something, I don't know. It is hard for me to pronounce those names, those type of names. Kinda. Yeah, so we're gonna apparently go into the water here a little bit. And then go up here. Yeah.
The three seasons known as Akhet, Peret, and Shemu corresponded to a specific phase of the agricultural process and the river's natural changes. Akhet was the time of the flood, beginning with the appearance of the star Sirius in July. Peret was the time when lands were cultivated, plowed, and sown. This fell between October and November. Shemu ran from May to September and was when harvesting and taxation began.
And of course, back in these days, there was major taxation on everything. Or, crap. Well, my bad. But we are going to go into the next area. And, yeah.
The pharaoh's duty was to uphold order against chaos and provide for his people. Priests and local governors also wanted to appear as protectors of the people. However, any variation in the Nile's seasons could cause water shortages. This had devastating consequences on wheat and barley crops. The pharaoh, administrators, and priests knew they needed to demonstrate their ability to prevent such a catastrophe from happening. And so they invented the story, which would be inscribed upon the famine stela.
Alright, so that is pretty much a stone image. Stela of King Intef II, the second. Wahang, I don't know. 11th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
The story begins with the pharaoh worried for his people. The Nile hasn't flooded in years, and his people are starving. In search of the origins of the flooding, Djoser seeks out Khnum, the protector god of the region and the source of the drought. Djoser gives the god offerings and orders his priests to restore the temple of Khnum. These offerings please the god, and the floods are restored. This story was intended to highlight the importance of the deity in everyone's daily lives, while also demonstrating the crucial role that the priests and the king played in feeding and protecting the people of Egypt.
Stele of the Famine, 3rd Dynasty, photo by D. Agostini, I think. Getty Images. And then we're going to go on to the Workers and Transport, which has 9 stations and is still part of the daily life. So in a moment here, I will, tell you which ones we will do in tomorrow's part, which will be part 2. That will be later on, though. So, tomorrow we will do, hold on a moment. Tomorrow we will do Romans and Alexandria. And then for the 4th part, third part, we will do Egypt. And then for the final part, I believe we will do pyramids.
Welcome to Workers and Transport. Whether workers were employed for the pyramid construction or at the quarries, the government supplied food and housing. Workers for the pyramids and royal necropolises were housed in more permanent villages, such as the famous Deir el-Medina. quarry workers had more temporary lodgings. All skill levels were needed and utilized, from basic work hands to prepare the gypsum, to brickmakers and sand carriers, to skilled stonemasons to shape the blocks.
That is Dear El Medina, Set Not, Place of Truth, 2012, credit Ubisoft.
Skilled architects and engineers were employed year-round, while support labor were often farmers who worked on the quarries or construction during the Nile's flood season. The basic laborers were hard-working and versatile. Many may have been farmers who joined the construction during the off-season. Hieroglyphs found in the work villages listed assigned job titles.
All right, that statue of the overseer and of stonemasons, Sembenu and family, 12th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Archaeological research shows that no food was stored or prepared on site, but instead workers received abundant rations of bread, beer, and meat. These rations were taken care of by an administration outside the village. Medical treatment was also available for those who were injured.
There you see, like this guy right here, he would probably be in the better social standing than either of these guys partially, and those guys for sure.
While some quarries were close to the Nile, others were located across the desert and required long expeditions. These expeditions were sanctioned by the state. They involved complex logistics and required many participants. Transporting a block by land meant that workers had to overcome the weight and friction of the load. To solve this, they first dug a track in the ground. This path was sometimes reinforced with rails upon which a sled, used to ferry the blocks, would be pulled.
Sledge from Mortuary Complex of Senworset I, 12th Dynasty Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York.
Whenever possible, blocks were toppled from a higher elevation onto the sled. Workers then poured water onto the clay at the front of the sled, creating a slick surface to more easily move the load. It wasn't until the New Kingdom that animals were used to tow the burden.
Right, that's detailed that, and credit to the New York Public Library Digital Collections.
During flood season, the Nile was at its largest and deepest, which allowed the transportation of the heaviest and biggest loads. Quarries close to the river had troughs dug out to deliver the stones to the shoreline. Harbors and wharfs situated at the river's edge allowed the transfer of materials and supplies. Harbor warehouses accommodated additional stocks of stone so that they were available for the winter sailing season.
All right, Giza for overview of Cheops Pyramids, 1997. Credit Jean-Claude Dalbin.
The Uwadi al-Jarf papyri detail a limestone load intended for the Khufu pyramid that weighed in at 70 to 80 tons, or 30 blocks. One papyrus is a fragment from a foreman's notes taken while working on the Great Pyramid. It details the transportation of limestone blocks from the Tura quarries to the construction site of the pyramid. The other papyri are shipping logs containing archives of the sailors assigned to sail the Red Sea and the Nile.
Of course, that is pretty much what he would have been reading there, filled with hieroglyphics. Ancient Egyptians, of course, being able to read that very well. 2016, Egyptian Museum, Cairo, Egypt. Mohammed El-Rai, AFP, Getty Images.
Stone cargo generally weighed 15 tons per boat, amounting to roughly 6 or 7 blocks per trip. For heavier loads such as obelisks, monolithic pillars, or gigantic statues, larger boats were used. These transports are the ones typically showcased on temple walls.
Of course, those are the temple walls she was speaking of, showing the water transportation tomb of Pahari, 2012, credit Ubisoft.
River transportation was the most efficient way to ferry stone blocks between the quarry and the construction site. Blocks were transported by flotillas of several types of boats. The most detailed illustration of transport by river is a relief of Queen Hatshepsut's barge with an accompanying flotilla.
And of course, it's 1869 historical inscriptions of ancient Egyptian monuments by Johannes Dumashin, I don't know. Credit the New York Public Library digital collections. It is pretty much like a picture depicting hieroglyphs and the boats that were used to transport different things, in other words. Oh, is that? And workers in transportation, that is done 8 stations for this one. One right above it is going to be a bit longer. That is 25 stations. Hopefully they're closely linked though.
Welcome to Building Ancient Egypt. Constructed with bricks made of mud, most ancient Egyptian buildings were not permanent. Only religious temples and funerary monuments were meant to stand the ravages of time. For these very important structures, Egyptians used limestone, sandstone, and harder materials, such as granite, quartzite, and travertine. These heavy stone blocks were so prized that they were often transported from quarries located hundreds of kilometers away.
Alright, detailed quarry mining village, 1994. Credit to Jean-Claude Galvin. It is pretty much a picture depicting that quarry in a mining village. And, you know, that's interesting. Built out of mud bricks, the houses, and obviously not meant to stand the test of time.
Limestone was common and easy to extract from quarries on the east bank of the Nile. This particular limestone had marine fossils in it, however, preventing it from being easily decorated and polished. Used as the main building material, the structure would then be finished with a finer limestone that was polished smooth and decorated as needed. Limestone was used for the building of the first pyramids and for most of the religious buildings of the Old and Middle Kingdoms.
So I think what I'm going to try to do for this series, or this collection of ancient history of Egypt type thing, or Egyptian history, is I'm going to try to make it at least less than 6 or 7 parts. So I might end this episode right after this building ancient Egypt section, and finish in the next one, the next portion of it.
Ancient Egyptians preferred to use sedimentary rock beds, or layers like sandstone and limestone, because they were often easier to extract. The common method used to extract stone was the open pit quarry. Stonecutters would find quality stone, shape, and dig it out on site. Open pit quarries enabled many workers to work simultaneously on many blocks, which allowed for better productivity.
Of course, stonemason's chisel is a picture of it right here. Started at 2051, 2000 BCE. Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York.
Workers would draw a large grid directly on the stone's surface, taking care to leave a space between the blocks. This allowed them to isolate the different blocks and create a trench that would make the extraction easier. Stoneworkers used iron chisels for hard rock and bronze or copper tools for softer rocks such as limestone. Removing material between each block created a trench line. In some quarries, that trench was wide enough to accommodate a worker, who would then cut the block entirely on site. For harder rocks like granite, workers cut a series of holes and hammered wooden wedges into them. They then soaked the wood until it swelled and caused the rock to split.
Quarries 1994, a picture describing it. Jean-Claude, credit to Jean-Claude Gold.
The gallery extraction technique was used when the desired rock was buried under layers of rubble. This method was often necessary in order to find the whiter and finer limestone required for a smoother finish. The first step was for the stoneworkers to create an access pit that would allow them to reach the desired wall of stone. Once a wall of quality stone was exposed, workers could then cut out smaller blocks. This pit required a descending platform. Designed like a stairway, it allowed them to free multiple galleries of blocks.
1987, photo credit, RMN Grand Palais, say Herbie Lewandowski. Yep, there we go. I think I got it that time. Hope, forgive me if I'm pronouncing it wrong.
To cut the stone, they created a longitudinal kerf, or slit, and then cut the rock at a 90-degree angle. The lower side was determined along the geological layers or by using a horizontal cut. Wooden wedges were inserted in the rock and hammered in. Shock waves were then generated using hammers, fracturing the blocks at the seam.
Right. Picture depicting it kind of circa 1850. I don't even know how to pronounce that. But the credit goes to the New York Public Library.
To maintain the stability of these mining pits over the course of quarrying, workers would leave support sections of unexcavated rock.
As there's no picture.
In every quarry, dedicated shrines were established to offer protection for the workers. In particular, Serket, the scorpion goddess, was considered a very powerful deity among quarry workers. Every mine and quarry of ancient Egypt included a scorpion charmer, who was said to use magical powers to ward off the dangerous insects and keep the workers safe.
All right. So that is it for this episode. I will see you guys tomorrow for part 2 and of the history of Egyptian history. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow for that. As always, though, guys, remember, stay dangerous.